At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES broadcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Super NES Podcast, episode number 172 this time. I am Greg, joined by my co-host Joe.
Hello.
And once again, we are pleased to have the guest host with us, like in the podcast. So we did warn everybody that this is going to be the march of the guest hosts here in this section. So, but anyway, I am pleased to have somebody on the podcast for the first time. A longtime friend of the podcast. I thought he had been on here in the past. It turns out that he did. It turns out he actually only had done some bumpers for us. So, I'm very pleased the first time to welcome friend of the podcast, Liam, to the podcast. How's it going, Liam?
It's going really well, actually. It's a little bit warmer than I expected it to be today, but hey, that's just how the temperature is in the UK.
Yes. Yes. So the accent should make it that pretty clear if anybody hasn't already picked up on that. But so where in the UK do you actually live?
I'm in southeastern England, so kind of near the coast.
Okay. So are you near Dover?
I'm a good few hours from Dover. I'm kind of north of Dover.
Okay, all right. So, but awesome. Okay, all right. Well, it's always fun to have European on the podcast because they have very different perspectives and whatnot, and also because of the fact that Europe, for the most part, this is curious. This also ties to the game that Liam brought to us to talk about. Usually, Europe got shafted when it came to games for the longest time because there's a lot of games would come out in North America but would not come out in Europe. But every now and then, the opposite happens because the game that Liam wanted us to discuss is a game that came out in Europe but not in North America, at least not for a very, very long time. So, so which game do you want to cover in this podcast episode, Liam?
So today we'll be talking about the shooter Poppin' Twinbee. Yes,
a Konami game, part of their Twinbee franchise, which we'll get into in just a moment. But in the meantime, Liam, since you're new to the podcast, why don't you tell us if you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your history of Super NES growing up, that kind of stuff.
Well, for me, with the Super Nintendo, it's quite an interesting story. My earliest memory with the Super Nintendo goes back, I think I was 4 years old, so it would be 1996. I nearly forgot what my age was then. That's always a good start. My earliest memory is actually of Super Mario World, but it wasn't me actually playing it. It was actually, I think it was my sister playing it, and the underwater music, ironically, from that game actually used to make me cry. So that's kind of the only initial memory I had of the Super Nintendo kind of from when I was a child. I also got back into the Super Nintendo when I was a Twitch streamer, sadly retired nowadays because, time and, adulthood and everything. And that's kind of where I discovered a lot of, lots of different games like Star Fox 2. I found that before it was officially released by Nintendo. Mickey Mania was one of the first ones I played. But there's just something about the Super Nintendo library that is just truly fascinating. Just the amount of different games that came out for that system, whether it be in Japan, the US, or here in Europe.
Yes. Yes, even though the library wasn't quite as big in Europe, Europe still got a very big Super NES library, so...
we got all the... Yeah, we definitely got all the classics, like, Super Metroid, Star Fox. We've got Star Fox, of course, and everything, but obviously that version's a little bit different because obviously lots of the games ran slower here. So
yes, but definitely. So, what's some of your favorite Super NES games then?
My favourites. Ooh, now that is a tough one. Super Mario World 2 would definitely be up there. I know that the baby crying can definitely annoy some people.
Oh man, does it ever?
Yeah, it's just one. It's just one of those things where you just think, why did you add that? Why does Mario have to ride 8 different colours of Yoshis? And second of all, why does he literally have to whinge every time he falls off the back of Yoshi? Really, I mean that would be up there. I would also say one of my other favourites that comes to mind. I've got so many that are in so many games just going through my head right now, but I'd say Star Fox 2 is also up there.
Yes,
Simply because the fact of the matter is that game was very, very ambitious for its time. I mean, obviously nowadays the graphics are dated, the music's a bit dated, of course, but at the time, if that game had been released, I think there could have been even more Star Fox games in the series, personally.
Yeah, definitely. So, have you had a chance to check out, like a lot of the Super NES catalog, like through emulation, like in recent years?
Oh, definitely. I've tried all sorts of interesting games. Like, for some reason, the Japanese beat-em-ups kind of really captured my attention.
Sure.
I can't remember what the name of it was. There was... I can't remember what series it even was from. Sorry. But it's just... Exploring the Japanese library, I find to be just truly... just fascinating. Like, for example, the Shin Megami Tensei games are one of the other series that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Like, not just the core Shin Megami Tensei games, but like the remakes of the NES ones that they released in, I think it was 95? And then obviously you had like Margin Tensei. They really had a lot of games in that series for the Super Nintendo. And most of them still stand up today, like, really well.
Yeah, we've covered one of the games in the podcast already. Like, it was a very good game. So, at least that series finally got is finally getting the respect and recognition that it deserves. So, so what about American games? Any American games that you really have found that you like that you wish had come out in Europe back then?
None that really spring to mind. I mean, obviously, quite a decent amount of the US library came over to Europe, but I think the only game that I don't think came to Europe was Earthbound. I don't think that was released in Europe, was it?
I was going to say most of the RPGs did not come out in Europe originally. But if you're not an RPG fan, like, you really wouldn't notice, because it's like Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI never came out in Europe originally either. For example, either. So, some good action games didn't come. Also because Europe's a lot more localized. Some games came out in England only, as opposed to not being out in the rest of Europe. Then you also had examples like Actraiser, which came out in Australia but not in Europe. So the only PAL version of that game's out there, like Australian copy. It's very, very weird. So
yeah, Actraiser is just one of those ones that I've always found just baffling that Australia got, but we did not get.
Yeah, we never figured that out either. So, just like for example, I'm gonna have theories here based on research as to why this game came out in Europe only, but we'll get into it here in a moment. So what about this game itself, Papa Twinbee? Did you play this back in the day, or was this more of a recent discovery for you?
This is a very recent discovery for me. So, on Nintendo Switch nowadays, you have the online virtual console that you get with the subscription. Yep. This is one of the games that came out this year. I think it was alongside another game that I have been enjoying as well. It's called Psycho Dream. So, what Nintendo did for a couple of the games is actually relocalize them themselves to then be released on the Nintendo Switch online platform.
Sure.
And this was one of those that I believe got relocalized by Nintendo, because the version that is on the Switch, I believe, was the original Japanese version, because it actually runs, kind of runs at the correct speed. It's not slowed down like the original Super Nintendo version was.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, so we're gonna have to explain this franchise a little bit here, because most of our listeners are not gonna be familiar with it. Even European listeners probably will not like be too familiar with the Twin Beast series because most of the games did not come out in the West. So, but yeah, it's interesting that you actually picked a game that was a more recent discovery because this game did come out in Europe, back in the day. But so I wasn't sure if you played it back then or not. But that's interesting. Okay, so yeah, so. The Twin Beast series. So I'll try to cover this in very basic terms. This is a franchise put out by Konami, of course. It has some similarities to their Gradius series, but instead of Gradius being more sci-fi and more futuristic, the Twin Beast series has always been kind of a cartoonish slash anime look and feel of like their games. Very cutesy graphics, bright, colorful sprites, that kind of stuff. So, and it actually has some elements of gameplay that are borrowed from other games, such as the whole being able to, such as having ground-based weapons as well as having ship-based weapons. That's a page taken directly from the Xevious series by Namco, which also features ship-to-ship shooting, both ground and air-based weapons. So. The last major thing that really sticks out to people, and this is a deal breaker for some people, I think. The power-up system in this game is very, very, very unique, and to me at least very, very frustrating. Because the way powers work in this franchise is that you shoot clouds, because of course you shoot clouds, why not? Which shoot out bells, and depending upon the color of the bell, depends upon the power that you get. And you have to shoot the bell like 5 times to change the color of the bell. I really do not like this system at all. I find it to be annoying, frustrating. It's too easy to miss the bell, too easy to grab the bell the wrong color. You're trying to do that while also trying to juggle usually the enemy fire coming at you. It's like I got the hang of it after a while, and I'm like, boy, do I hate this system. with a passion, I hate this system. But I can hear from Joe's reaction; he agrees with me. Liam, so what do you think about the whole power system that this game uses?
I think the power system's quite interesting. I feel interesting's the best way to describe it. I do agree with you in terms of the whole juggling thing. Because the fact of the matter is that there are times in this game where there's just screens, and I mean screens just full of enemies, especially in the later stages. Mm-hmm. And also, the problem is that if you accidentally hit a different power up, you have to stick with that. Mm-hmm. And if you've got there is a power up that has quite a wide range on screen. If you lose that, and you're stuck with one of them that just floats all the way across the screen and doesn't really do much, you've kind of, pretty much through bad luck, got yourself a pretty, sometimes miserable power-up.
Yes.
But as well, I found that the power-ups as well kind of play as well, because on the menu there's also 3 different ways that you can have, because one of the power-ups as well is that you can pick up assistants.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Which, the way that they shoot is dependent upon which thing you picked at the start, whether you picked normal, surround, and there was one other that I just didn't use because it was...
It's very similar to the option system, the option system that's used in Gradius, whether you have the options either around in a circle or on your sides, your tail behind you. So
yeah.
But because if I haven't said this before, you're actually playing this. You're actually playing this franchise a B-shaped Beck. I can't say that word. Anthropomorphic spacecraft, which is named Twin Bee. So, like I said, this is a weird series. Definitely one of those only in Japan things. But and you also get a pink female counterpart that Liam was just talking about, who's known as Wind Bee. So. For example, in this game here, Pop and Twin Bee, you either could play as a single player or 2-player, and if you're doing 2-player mode, somebody's playing it. One person's playing Twin Bee, and the other person's playing Wind Bee. So, like I said, most of these games in this franchise did not come out in the West. A few games did here and there. The original game in the franchise was called Twin Bee, which came out in 1985. This was an arcade game only, then ported to various systems such as the Famicom, the MSX. The Game Boy Advance, the DS, etc., etc. So, the second game in this series, I actually did not know this. The second game in the franchise. I'm gonna try the Japanese here. Apologies, like I butcher it. Which is known as Mario Twin B Cinnamon Hakase Osuki. Actually came out in North America. It came out. They localized the game and modified in some ways for the NES, playing a game called Stinger, which I never realized because I had played Stinger back. Because I played Stinger as a kid back in the day. Pretty good game actually, like hard game, but not a good game. I never realized it. I never realized until doing research it was actually part of the Twin B series. So, the next game in the series stayed out like in Japan only. But then you had the fourth game in the series, Pop Twin B, which is the game that we're covering here in this podcast. Came out October 1990. Got a European release in 1994. The European version of this game was handled by a company called Palcom, which was a branch of Konami which operated in Europe during the early to mid 90s. It's kind of the equivalent of the Ultra series, the series that we had here in North America, whereas Konami used it to release. They considered it to be like secondary games or games and whatnot. So, this wasn't, and Pop Twin B wasn't the only strange game that Palcom picked to release in Europe. They did it with a bunch of other games too. There were a bunch of, like, for example, of Japanese MSX games that was also got localized and ported to the MSX, because the MSX was also fairly popular in Europe as well. So, Palcom made some very curious decisions as far as which games to bring over to Europe. But this was one of the games that they decided that would do pretty well. So. Sorry. But anyway, yeah. So, being a shooter, this game was very playable here by North Americans. Anyway, we actually did finally get it. So North America finally did get a release of this game over here officially, which is what Leah mentioned earlier. In February 2020, it was added to the Nintendo Switch library. So. You actually can now officially buy this game in North America for the first time 27 years after it came out. Yeah. So, better late than never, I guess. But, so after this game, there was a few other. There were a few other games. There were 6 main Twin B games came out. Period with a bunch of a whole bunch of side games and guiding games as well too. The last game for this franchise came out in 2013, and given how Konami's pretty much pulled out of the video game market altogether, I really don't expect any more games to come out anytime soon. Yeah. But so, however, the Twin B series was very popular in Japan. So popular, in fact, they actually had a radio drama inspired by it. Which lasted for 3 seasons, as well as also having anime, but an anime version as well.
So Japanese.
Yes. Well, I mean, the game looks very Japanese based upon the cartoony graphics and whatnot, which we're gonna hear to we'll get here to in a moment. So, being a shooter, the plot of the game is very minimal. Basically, you get a just call like a young girl. She's the granddaughter of a scientist, named Dr. Marduk, who used to be pretty kind until he got a bump in the head and turned him evil, because of course it did. So now Twin B and Win B are the ones who can stop him. So, I mean, it's a shooter. As just said, you really don't need too much a plot. So, anyway, so that's the basic setup of the game and whatnot. Liam, you have probably had the most experience out of the 3 of us playing this game.
Yeah.
Does anyone tell us the gameplay, how it works, how it operates, that kind of stuff?
Well, the gameplay is actually quite simple, all things considered. You start obviously on the first stage, and what really the core goal is to kind of power yourself up for these, how can I say, very obtuse and very strangely designed bosses. The game's quite unique. You mentioned about the 2 planes. I really like that system because it kind of with the problem is with some shooters, especially from this sort of era, is that there can be so much downtime between different sections. But in this case, it's very much, if there's nothing in the air, there are things that you can aim for on the ground. But here's something I found out about aiming for the enemies on the ground, is that if you destroy enough of them, a little heart will appear, and that is the core way that you actually regain health in this game. It's very, very well hidden, but I think it's a pretty decent reward for kind of exploring the enemies on the ground. The other thing about the game that is quite interesting that I don't think I've seen too much in shooters is your power-ups kind of carry on with you from stage to stage. So, for example, if you beat a boss and you don't game over, all the power-ups you have kind of move on to the next stage with you. But yeah, the core setup of the game is pretty much survive through a stage with so many cutesy, intriguingly designed enemies, and then you obviously face a boss, which, as I say, they're just so weirdly designed. But I suppose that kind of fits in with the style of the game. I believe there are 7 stages, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't check that myself, like right now. Yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah, and what I find pretty interesting in between each stage is that there's like a little, kind of like a short few seconds, like cartoon almost.
Yeah.
So, for example, after the first stage, you see the girl kissing the male character and just him going completely red. which, believe me, any guy at that age, when you get kissed by a girl, trust me, that is a natural reaction. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a pretty standard setup. Just survive and, you know, save the girl at the end.
Yeah. There are some very different. There are some very interesting options that you have as far as shooting this game. You have your shot and your bomb. You also have what's called you also have chibi, punch, energy, and throw as well. As well as you can also do with your buttons. Liam, do you want to say real quick what those do?
I'm trying to remember actually. Admittedly, I didn't use all those power-ups too much. I believe there is a power-up that you can collect from the cloud juggling that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And what that one does, it's quite simple. It kind of spews Wingby all over the screen. Like how Wingby multiplies the amount of times that it does is truly unusual. Like, it basically goes from one little Wingby to like 50. And as I say, that was the only power that I really used. I mean, the other ones I never really got around to really needing or using, really.
Yeah, the punch one's pretty fun. The punch one basically just lets you throw a punch across the screen. It makes me sound. So, whereas the throw one allows you to be able to just the throw one allows you to be able to throw an enemy. One of the really unique things. So the option screen for this game is actually very good because not only can you set the because not only can each player also change their mapping on the controller. You also can change the difficulty level. There's 7 default difficulties in this game, which is very good. You know, I appreciate games that have a very wide variety of difficulties to pick from. There's more difficulties, but we'll get into that later on. And you also pick your option of playing either in normal game mode or couple game mode. And couple game mode is very unique. Something I wish more games had actually. Basically, in couple mode, couple mode is designed for 2 people playing together. But unlike a regular game, if it's couple mode, the enemy attacks will primarily focus upon player 1. So therefore, this allows the player not as good as the first player to play player 2 and still enjoy the game, have fun in it, because most of the attacks are not coming through. Most attacks are not going to be aimed toward them. So that's a very cool feature. I mean, I wish I can't think of anything game that does that. So
yeah, it's kind of the sort of thing where it's very much like when you used to put play, I know I'm going to reference a Sega Genesis game here. It's kind of like with Sonic
That's
2
fine,
when you
Joe's-
have...
Joe's Genesis kid, she's growing up like you're fine.
Yep.
Okay, I'm glad I'm forgiven for that. It kind of reminds me of with Sonic 2 when you can control Tails, where the enemies kind of don't go after Tails, but also the fact that if you've got like a younger sibling, it's the perfect thing for them to do, because obviously player 1 is doing all the legwork, and obviously player 2 feel like maybe like a 3 or 4 year old like child, for example, can play along almost, but in this game it kind of gives them, they have a purpose more in there, rather than just being there to keep the young child occupied. It's very much that they can have an impact. They could get like the final hit on the boss fight, for example.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then also, in this game, like some other games, if you're playing 2-player mode, one player can take a little bit of energy like the other player as well too to help them playing. So there's that feature here like as well also. So this game is so we can talk about this like for a moment. This game is a vertical shooter. Let me toss the question now to Liam first. Do you prefer I'm actually a big fan of shooters. I feel very strongly about this. Do you prefer a game that's a vertical shooter or a horizontal shooter?
I prefer vertical shooters personally. I think with a horizontal shooter, for me, it's I find it a little bit in terms of being able to do things with the depth perception. I feel like the horizontal shooters kind of, they can't really do much in terms of depth, in terms of like background sort of animations. I find with vertical shooters as well a little bit more interesting, because obviously, especially with this game as an example, it's not just air combat only. It's not just shoot things in front of you, move on. It's very much there's almost like that second plane that the developers can play with almost, and kind of add different mechanics.
Okay, that's a good argument. So Joe, how about you?
I am more of a vertical shooter guy than horizontal. That being said, as much as I do love games like this where you have things in the air and then on the ground you have to focus on, a lot of my favorite games are horizontal shooters. But I do prefer vertical, believe it or not. But Harmful Park, Sexy Perotus, even R-Type, those are all horizontal. So
Yeah. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna be the odd out. I actually prefer horizontal shooters, and I think that's primarily because in my formative years of playing games, also the shooters I played were horizontal shooters.
Right.
So vertical shooters were like more rare back in the day. I do think this game works fine as a vertical shooter. I grew up playing the Gradius games, R-Type and whatnot, and those are all horizontal shooters. I didn't really get into a vertical shooter until Dragon Spirit, which is a great game. I love Dragon Spirit, but I also really enjoy Life Force a lot, because Life Force actually alternates between the two.
Yeah.
And it works very well in that game too. I think so. So. Speaking about the graphics, we have talked about the graphics a little bit here. They're very, very good. Keeping with the Twin Beast series. You would know this, of course, unless you actually were familiar with the Twin Beast games. But the graphics are very. Obviously, you can tell it's a Japanese game. The graphics are very bright, colorful, kind of anime style. But they look very impressive on the system, and also depth perception, like Liam mentioned earlier, is done very well in this game. They're definitely kind of the Super NES's graphical layer techniques are used to good effect to get a nice layer of depth to the games you're playing it. So, Liam, anything you want to add on to about that?
I would definitely say another thing about the graphics that it kind of really stood out for me is with some games from this era that I've noticed, when the scrolling's going on, sometimes it can look a little bit jarring. This game, I had absolutely no issues with that. No matter how long the game was scrolling for, the graphical, how can I say, integrity of that second layer, it just looks stunning the whole time.
Yeah.
There's never any occasion where it looks jarring to the eye.
True. Yeah, and I was actually curious about that. Curious about that. I played this game. I played this game both like in original PAL format and also like adapt it in the emulator for any like for NTSC format. And the game plays just as with. And the game actually plays just well like in both cases. Palcom did a great job of adapting the game for the European systems, I think. So. Because sometimes conversions can be kind of choppy in that area. Not this one. I mean, like I still prefer playing this in NTSC format because it reaches the faster speed. But at least the game plays smoothly in PAL format and not every shooter did. So I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of games from this sort of from the era that Poppin' Twinbee came out that really was able to nail down that 50 hertz refresh rate.
Yes.
I mean, even some games like the PAL version of things like Super Mario World or Donkey Kong Country, that due to the fact that it has to run that little bit slower, there's still, you can tell like where it's trying to refresh that other 10 hertz, but it's just not there.
Yeah.
But with this game, I think it's one of the stronger Super Nintendo ports to the PAL region because the graphics look as good alongside the NTSC version, and that's pretty uncommon to see, especially in the PAL market.
Yeah, yep, definitely. I agree with that. Joe, how about you?
I really enjoyed this game, and I felt that this is probably one of the smoothest shooters that I've seen on the Super Nintendo. Like, I didn't see a single hiccup, no sign of slowdown. I played both the PAL and the Japanese versions. So, obviously, PAL's a tad bit slower, and I think that can sometimes work to your advantage. But, Japanese version was fun and frantic. The bells drove me nuts.
Yes.
So, it's like, it's kind of like Cotton. So, I've recently been playing a lot of Cotton on the Sega Saturn, and it's like you also have a mechanic there where like you can shoot gems and they change colors, and then they change weapons and do different power-ups and whatnot. Same sort of thing as here, and but there, like, you can just infinitely shoot them and they just change color, and then you'll eventually pick them up. And that was kind of the strategy I took here. Except for I found out that after shooting them too many times, they just turn back to bronze, and you're just collecting points. You're not getting any power-ups. So eventually, I worked myself into a corner.
The actual, the power mechanic in this game is very similar to the power mechanic in this game is very similar. It's very similar to the shooter that I love. I'm not sure if you guys have played 1943. Mm-hmm. But that also works. That also works. It also works a very similar way in that game where you shoot shoot a power up enough times it changes something. You shoot the power up again a few more times it changes something else. It's just not as I just found the bells to be more aggravating in this game compared to 1943. And we're trying to do that, however, maybe because one, this game has this game has multiple bells at once usually, as opposed to just one power up at a time in 1943. And two, it seems easier to shoot a power in 1943 as opposed to this game because the bells here are like, I don't know, they feel smaller. The hit detection box on them like feels tighter. So
Yeah, I found that with the hitboxes with the bells, there were many times where I thought I had shot them, but in fact, because it was not absolutely in the center of the bell, it would just go straight on. The other thing as well with the bells that personally I found somewhat annoying is that sometimes when you're trying to shoot other enemies, if there's still bells on screen, you don't hit those enemies, you hit the bells instead.
Right. Yeah. If I was to have like one complaint about this game, it would definitely be the hit detection, like in the collision detection in this game, because it's fair for the most part, but there definitely are times I felt like okay, that shot definitely should not have killed me. So,
right.
So I think the collision detection in this game is a little bit wonky, wonky in some places.
I'd also say, based upon that as well, that also the amount of iframes you get after you take a hit it's just nowhere near enough.
True. Yeah.
Basically, you could end up tanking multiple hits at once, and before you know it, you've crashed into the ground, and you're just thinking, how did that knock me out the sky? How?
Yes, especially stage 6. Stage six is like remarkably increase the difficulty level for some reason. So, but yeah, that's really a game where that's the game. If I really get serious, it's serious at you. Well, I would argue also that next to an RPG, the most important thing to a shooter is music, and luckily this game has a great soundtrack to shoot by. Again, Konami games tend to have great music, so again, that's to be expected. And if you're checking out some other Twin Bee games, all the games in the franchise have pretty good music. But the music in this game is very good. It's kind of a mix between a cutesy, cartoony piece and also like more of a serious one, if that makes sense. But it's very energetic, upbeat, but still whimsical soundtrack to shoot by. So Oh, sorry.
So,
I was just gonna finish up. It's very keeping with the actual theme of this game.
Yeah, I personally agree with that. I think that the music in this game is nothing short of stunning, because the thing is, at the end of the day, with a shooter, as well as the core gameplay mechanics, if you've got a soundtrack that is grating on the ear, you just think, well, I don't want to play that.
Yes.
But in this case, I think just the range of arrangements in terms of the different. Each stage kind of had its very own, very unique sound to it. And also in the sound department, I'd say as well, the sound effects for the most part they're pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The only one I dislike is when you get hit.
Yeah.
Because that high pitch like that, it's just especially when you get hit multiple times, it just drives you up the wall.
Yeah, the cute little voices of this game are nice, but because we're not Japanese, so we don't know what they're saying, so they could have been left out and nobody would have been the wiser.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a different variety of different sounds as well, because I feel that the amount of sounds that the character, when he gets it, takes, also the different sounds that he makes, there's just not enough variety to it. I mean, if you had a few different, sort of a more lower pitched sound, or a different reaction to maybe taking a hit on a different part of, say the ship, for example, perhaps that would make it less irritating.
Yeah, I can see that. Sorry, I wasn't bothered by that quite as much as you were, but I definitely I can see that. I definitely, the winner for having the worst soundtrack in 1942, but that's not even a soundtrack per se. So, fun game, but just play something else in the background. So, Joe, what do you think about the music?
I love the music. Up against the visuals of this game, the music is almost right there at par. And this game is the way I described this game in my notes was, this is Cute 'em ups personified. When I think Cute 'em up, this game is exactly what I'm talking about. It's got the whimsical music, it's got the graphics that are all cutesy. Everything I think in this game has a smile on it, I'm pretty sure. Except for some of the bosses, but those bosses are meant to be menacing. And they do a good job. I really love the bosses in this game. But yeah, the music's fantastic. It sets the tone perfectly. And I agree with Liam. If it wasn't for, the little ship going really high pitched, it'd be absolutely perfect.
Yeah. No, definitely, yeah. So, I mean, the Paradise series also has a very cutesy graphics as well too. Right. It's kind of a different style. Mm-hmm. So, but
very different.
Yes,
definitely.
But, I will have to cover Paradise game at some point too, because those games are also fun. But anyway, I definitely can agree with all that. The games are typical length as far as a shooter, 45 minutes to an hour to play through. What difficulty level did you guys use to play the game like beat it? Well, I assume you beat it, but what difficulty level did you set it at?
I personally just kept it on the default because me being my usual curious self, shall we say, decided that, I'll have a look at this on difficulty 7 the first time I played it, and yeah, if that was not, if the one word comes to mind is just sheer brutality, because literally it's just...
That's not even the hardest level either. Like, we'll get to that. But
I know it's not the hardest one, but in terms of the hardest default,
yeah.
But
yeah, the default setting for this game is 4, by the way, in case you were like wondering about that. Wondering about that. You know, the 7 game levels, the game default is 4. So okay, yep.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was 3 or 4 personally.
Yeah,
but...
I was left at a 4. So Joe, how about you?
Oh, I played it on 2. Let's be fair. We've talked numerous
That's fine.
times about how little time I have to play video games, and we've also talked about how my reflexes aren't what they used to be. So, yeah, I was very tempted to just play on 1, but then I was like, if I play on 1, I'm not going to get the full experience. It's probably going to be a sparse landscape as far as being able to shoot stuff. So I was like, I got to have at least some sort of challenge. So I did play on level 2, and like I said, I enjoyed it. I really did.
But yeah, I mean, yep, that's fair. Like I said before, like I do appreciate a game that has multiple different levels like this, and nobody should judge you. Like you play the game, how you want to play it. But,
I know you were judging me, Greg. It's okay.
Don't you worry, I won't judge you on that. Don't you worry.
I mean, and like I said before, I thought the game does a good job. Like I said before, I thought the game does a good job, pretty much of ramp difficulty until stage 6 and 7. The last stages of the game get brutally hard.
Yeah.
So I don't know why the game felt the need that sharp spike and increased difficulty, but it's there, so let's be warned.
I did like that it did the thing that some shooters do, where I could just hold down the fire button and I could just rapid fire. Thank God.
Yes.
That was fantastic. But
that just leave your thumbs.
Yeah, if I had to keep on pounding the controller to shoot, I probably would have given up.
And the other thing with that you mentioned about the holding the shoot button down, did either of you two notice that the further up the screen you were, the quicker that it fired?
Yeah.
So if you're right at the bottom of the screen, I think it's only 3 shots on screen you can have at one time before it doesn't allow you to shoot anymore. But if you're higher up the screen, it was basically it was shooting so quick.
Yeah.
I think 8-9 shot. It was just like a savage assault on anything in front of you.
Yeah, I think that had to do something with the limitations of the system. That's the only thing I can think of, because like I said, this game runs so smooth, which usually there's some slowdown when it comes to so much stuff on screen and everything else with shooters. So that's the only thing I could think of, because I noticed that as well. But also, you better be at the bottom of the screen, because if you're even halfway up or even up any higher, you're going to get hit by something and end up, taking some damage. So, but that's one thing I liked about this game. They give you 1 life, but they don't punish you. So you have 1 life, you have your health gauge, but you also have 7 continues. So they expect you to die. They just don't expect you to die more than once per level.
And there are codes available that will change that as well too. We'll get into that as well. Sorry.
I was gonna say with the amount of continues you get as well. Normally with a game like this, I was thinking if you got 3 continues, you would be really lucky.
Right.
But I think 7 is kind of the perfect amount, because what it can do, if you're in a latter stage, like you mentioned, stage 6 or stage 7. If you've got continues in hand, you can kind of adjust yourself as you go through the stage. So let's just say you hit the halfway point of stage 6, where the brutality just goes through the roof. At least you can learn, what are the patterns here? How do the enemies behave? And then if you lose a life, you've got those continues in hand, you can it's very much the game kind of gives you a very good good chance to learn what's ahead of you almost. But doing it in such a way that it doesn't, say, oh, you've only got 3 continues, oh, you've only got 1 left, you're only on stage 4, just try again later, mate.
So I think I know the answer to this already, but I'll ask. There was one other Twin Bee game also released in Europe back in the '90s. There was Pop and Twin Bee Rainbow Bell Adventures, which also Powercom decided to localize for the European markets. Have you played that one? Do you like it all, Liam?
I haven't actually. I've heard of it, but
It's a very different game. A very different game. It still uses it still uses the Twin Bee characters, and still set in Twin Bee universe, but that game's a side-scrolling platformer instead.
Now that you say side-scrolling platformer, I have seen it played. It's the platforming aspect of that is quite interesting. I won't dive into too much detail because obviously, future episodes and everything like that. But I think that how it transfers into a if I can say side-scrolling platformer, how it converts into a side-scrolling platformer is quite interesting. It kind of goes down like the Super Mario World-esque sort of like map. You pick the levels and everything like that. So,
yeah, they did try to branch out the games to the franchise quite a bit over the years. I mean, it started as a shooter, but it also branched out to platforming games, puzzle games, RPGs. So they did try to there was even like a rock paper scissors game like for mobile phones. So at least they tried to branch things out. Well, we'll take it credit for. So I think most people are familiar with the series because of being a shooter, but it's a lot more. But the games of the series like a lot more than just being a shooter. So.
Pretty much, if there is a genre of video game out there, Twin Bee has you covered at least in one way, shape, or form.
Considering they have considering they have a pachinko game even, I think you're probably right.
Oh god, I forgot about the pachinko game. But again, this is Konami we're talking about. What isn't a pachinko machine?
There was even like a roguelike dungeon RPG game made like with cell phones. Interesting. So
I should try and find a way to play that. That just sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, well, A, Japan only, B was a mobile game from like 2003, so good luck. But looking down this list, a lot of interesting games. So, so I've not played anything from the Twin Bee series before in the past. I'm curious now to check out like more games in the franchise because, as we said before, I love shooters. If I can get around my dislike of the power-up system, this is actually like a pretty like fun, challenging series, I think. So at least at least based upon this game did get very high reviews. People do consider it to be one of the best games of the franchise. So, at least Powercom back in the day made a very good choice as what game to localize over there in Europe. So.
See, I think the best way to describe Poppin' Twin Bee personally is that it's a fantastic game, but with caveats.
Yes. And which ones would you say like those like warnings?
Of the caveats that I personally disliked, as I say, the whole bell system was annoying. And then the sound design. The sound design was great, apart from obviously the weird pain sounds. Yeah. But I think apart from that, if you can get your mind over that, I would say that also this is a great game for someone who's looking to get into shooters. Yes. Because with the different difficulty levels, if you're very much not used to a vertical scrolling shooter, obviously playing this on difficulty 1 is a great way for you to see, kind of get a great introduction into not just the shoot 'em up genre, but also the cute 'em up side of things, which is obviously a little bit more of a niche sort of genre, really.
Right. Yep, definitely agree. So I'd agree with all that. I also would add the small thing. Collision detection, the hit detection box is a little bit wonky, I think, but not like a deal breaker. Those were like my negatives to say like about the game. Joe, it sounds like that you would agree with. If you agree with like most of that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even notice like the hitbox, in all honesty, because the way I play vertical shoot 'em ups anyways, as I'm constantly moving left and right and just like spamming the fire button. So it's like I'm just shooting and clearing the way. So if there's a hitbox and I miss it, I don't even notice. I'm just like, you are going to die eventually.
You're going to lose a life eventually, but when you lose a life, you just do not know that.
Right.
Plus, also adding on to what Liam said, like this game, like being like very gentle newcomers. If you can play, so like if you actually have, actually have somebody to play with, playing couple mode makes the game even like playing couple mode makes the game even easier for you. So this is a very good. All that to take it together. This is a great game. Definitely like introduce people to shooters with for those reasons. So.
There is also one unique feature on the Switch version that I do want to quickly bring up, which is with the two Joy-Cons, player 1 would actually get the left Joy-Con, and the game actually recognises, this might be due to the way that it was ported, the right Joy-Con is actually for player 2. So you wouldn't need two separate sets of controllers. You could use one Joy-Con for player 1 and the other one for player 2, and the game recognises it absolutely fine.
Kind of cramped though, isn't it?
It's a little bit cramped, but...
I was going to say, it wouldn't be the way I'd be playing, but, that's pretty nice either way.
Yes. Yep. Nope, definitely agree. So, so this is fun, kind of like a trivia fact. Because of how popular that the characters in this game were, I mean, like, for Japan, they got, like anime or drama, manga, et cetera, et cetera. Characters in these games showed up cameos in a lot of other video games. Many of those games did not come out here in the U.S., but in the U.S. obviously, but a few of them did. Snatcher, for example. So I love Snatcher. I'm not sure if you guys have played Snatcher, but it's a shame that the only North American or Europe published version of the game is so rare to find these days. But two characters of this game, Light and Pastel, appears Clyde inside Out Have Nightclub. Kind of in the background, like other Konami characters, like they're great characters. Those kind of Easter egg. Twin B also makes an appearance as a secret item in two Castlevania games, Portrait of Ruin and Order of Eshua. So, Harmony Despair too is also there. So, that's probably those two are probably the biggest Western cameos like with characters like in this franchise. So anyway, being a Japanese game only game for a while, or mostly while. I don't know how well this game sold in Europe, but like most of its reputation came from Japan. The game did pretty well in Japan, so it got average scores of 80%, like around that. So most of the U.S., most of the modern U.S. European review scores thought this game around the same score. So good, not great. So we have a very very good solid score.
Yeah, I tend to agree with those as well, because obviously the caveats that we've mentioned definitely could be, it could be the one thing that stops people thinking, this game is great. Instead they just think, well, the hit detection's a bit rough, the character personally sounds like he's in pain, and... Yeah, but obviously the more unique aspects, I can see maybe why those scores kind of stayed around, 7 or 8, where the core game is solid, but there's obviously still small minutiae that could have made the game that little bit better.
Right. Yep. Definitely agree with that. So yeah, fun game. Anybody enjoys shooters and doesn't mind cutesy things, definitely should check this out. Because this is a very underrated game. Because like I said before, it was Japan and Europe for the longest time. So I think a lot of people probably didn't even recognize this game. So definitely a fun game. Definitely should be given a look by anybody who really enjoys games of this type. So before we move on to codes and eBay and whatnot and close things out, do either one of you have any final thoughts you want to say about this game?
I would personally say that in terms of shooters, I'm someone who is not immensely experienced with shooters. I've obviously played a decent amount over the years, but I'm not what I'd call hardcore. I would say if you can get over the fact that it's like some people may find the cutesy graphics a little bit off-putting. If you can get over like the small problems that we've had with it, this is a really fun game just to play in one sitting. I mean, as you mentioned, it's about an hour. I mean, if you game over a couple of times, it's still not going to clock in at more than say 2 to 3 hours. You could definitely play it in an afternoon, and it's definitely it's my favourite game from this particular series. I mean, obviously, with the platform one, I've got a little bit of experience with that. I've seen a couple of the others. But I just think that in terms of Super Nintendo shooters that I would recommend for newcomers, not just to the genre, but to the Super Nintendo as a whole, this is one of those which you can't go wrong with that much. I mean, obviously, apart from the annoying sound effect, which literally drove me to insanity half the time, but hey, nothing can be perfect, can it?
Good summary. Joe, how about you?
I love this game. I thought this was a great little shooter. Like I said, I have experience with shoot 'em up, so that helped. Music's fantastic. Graphics are great. I don't mind the bell system. I just wish that it was kind of like Cotton, where it was just an infinite rotation of the powers, and that it wouldn't eventually, quote-unquote, burn out. Outside of that, fantastic game, and highly recommended.
Yeah, definitely. It's a definitely like more like obscure game, like for sure. So it is always fun to like see like things like this like show up. So
I personally would also say I think this is one of those games that it is a shame that it didn't get outside of Europe and Japan, because I feel like this sort of game at the time, like when it was ported to Europe in 1994. The more unique side of the Super Nintendo was starting to be shown. You had things like Super Metroid come out. You had Donkey Kong Country. This kind of would have really helped fill in a gap in the Super Nintendo library in terms of not just a shoot 'em up, but something that looks that little bit different, something that little bit more unique.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can't think of another shooter that looks exactly in this style. Joe mentioned Parodius. But obviously, that's a little bit. Obviously, I think that's a little bit more. It's a little bit differently designed. This is like purely like proper cutesy. But I just think that this game is, as you both mentioned, is exceptionally underrated. This is a game that really, if you like shoot 'em ups in any way, shape, or form, just give it a try. I mean, there's nothing to lose, and quite a fun game to gain from it.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like. It sounds like what you were saying earlier, Liam. It sounds like the Switch version of this game plays very well.
Oh, the Switch version plays extremely well. Obviously, the option for the 2-player, I think, is also a great feature, because obviously through emulation, sometimes getting someone else on the other side to play can be a little bit difficult. But I just think that just having the ability just to hand another Joy-Con off to someone else and say, do you want to play this for 20 minutes and just chill out for a little bit? It's that sort of thing that I think is great about this game, personally.
Sure. I cannot find. Yeah, obviously, I cannot find any official reason as to why this game didn't come out in North America, because it's not a shock, because most of the time you can't find anything out there saying like why a game wasn't released for X market or Y market. But if I had to guess, it's just because that the Konami felt that the game was just too cutesy for the North American market probably at the time, because anime in the early 90s was just really starting to get popular over here. So they also may have felt the game plays too similar like the Gradius series. So if I had to make an educated guess, those are the two reasons as to why the game never came out over here. But which also makes it. Which makes it even weirder that Palcom decided to pick this game out of a few other games to localize for Europe several years later. Go figure. So, like I said before, Palcom made some very curious choices in what games to bring over to the European market anyway. So,
yeah, agreed.
But all right, so as you might expect of any kind of shooter, there are a bunch of codes and secrets hidden in this game. So So the big ones are going to be most of these codes. You have to like actually pause the game, input the code, and then like you unpause the game to activate them. So pretty typical shooter mechanism like for that. There's a code to give you 8 continues. There's a code to give you like 9 chibis. There's a code to give you like full energy. There's a code to make you like invincible, and there's a code to give you like a level select, and also, in case you're wondering, yes, the classic Konami code is here in this game. However, if you re-input it in the gameplay, it causes your ship to blow up. So, very similar to what it does in Gradius 3. You try to put the classic code like in that game. So, cute touch, Konami. But anyway, there is a level 8 difficulty that I alluded to before. Like, in case you thought the regular game was not hard enough, you can they can unlock an insane difficulty setting. This is accessed by using the Konami code. This time on the option screen instead to like show up that level 8 difficulty setting for you. So
Well, thank God for that.
there is. There's also finally stage select. There's also finally stage select that you can use. It differs. The code differs. The code differs depending if you're playing the Japanese version or the US European version. So look up the appropriate code for what version of the game you play. So yeah, those codes are those codes at your disposal. You have no reason not to finish this game. So, there's also code to give you a mini B as well too. Like I forgot about that one. So, a bunch of codes in this game that you can use to help you out. eBay pricing. This is going to be a little bit complicated and messy, only because the game's available in so many formats So I'm going to do the best I can, try to summarize this, and try to make it understandable for anybody listening to this, because the game got released multiple times, multiple formats, multiple regions. There are numerous ways about this game. If you're so inclined. Also, I include shipping prices usually like at this. Most of the copies of this game available to you are going to be obviously shipping from Europe, because that's where it was released at. So for anybody over there who anybody like Liam who already is in Europe, the shipping costs are obviously going to be a lot cheaper, because as a rule of thumb, shipping from Europe to the US on this game like never near about $15. So basically, if you're in Europe, you can feel free just to minus $15 off the cost like these listings. So
unless you're shipping from mainland Europe to the UK, which
nowadays, yeah, I've heard about that. So
which you might as well just add another $100 onto that just to get someone to ship it to the UK.
Is it that bad? Holy Christ!
Now I'm kidding with that. Don't worry, it's not that high, but it might as well be.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, unfortunately. So anyway, let's get started here then. If you want to get a version of the cart from Japan only, the Japanese Super Famicom version of the game, nothing expensive. Like I said before, these prices all include shipping. So again, these are prices that come from like Japan. Oh, let me also say, this game's fairly common on eBay. I found 77 copies of this game being listed on there worldwide. 10 of those copies were available in North America, and 52 copies of the game sold recently worldwide. 8 of those copies sold in North America. So you don't need to actually pay the high shipping costs if you don't want to. You can find copies of this game already available in North America. So it's just more common, and probably cheaper if you're willing to ship worldwide. Yeah. So anyway. Japanese Super Famicom card only of this game. Running anywhere from about $21 to that running anywhere from about $21 to $28. Considering shipping from Japan, not bad price. So,
no, I expected it to be lower though, because this series is pretty popular over in Japan, so I would think that they.
You're also talking, like I said before, you're also talking like $10 to $15 of shipping.
That's true. Alone. Okay, good point.
So,
Good point.
But that's what I said.
Never mind.
So that's what I said. that's why I said it's so confusing trying to get a breakdown because the game's available in so many formats,
Right.
sort of in many countries or whatnot. So, obviously, yeah, if you do snag one of those like North American only copies, it'll be around like $10 to $15. So, but. If you want a CIV copy of this game from Japan, that already about $45. So, if you want a copy from Europe, a PAL copy of this game, again, pricing varies wildly depending upon what country in Europe this is coming from and whatnot. Card only copies. You can have a card only version of this game shipped to you from Europe to the United States, and anywhere from $27 to $73, depending upon condition and whereabouts in Europe it's coming from. Like how it's been shipped to you. Air Express versus like slow boat to China format. So CIB pretty much same thing. A wild ranging of pricing. Okay, anywhere from $62 all the way up to $170, depending upon condition, the completeness, and also like where it's coming from. So. Finally, there are people available who have made available repro copies of this game, which is common. You usually see this like Japanese only games. Somebody's taking so what that means is somebody's taking the time to take a copy of the game, modify it for US release, stick the ROM onto a US Super NES cart, and manufacture a label for what it might have looked like had the game gotten a US release. So, the beauty of this format is like they have a Super NES system where we have like a clone system like a Retcon or whatnot. You can just take the cart in the system and go. Like you don't have to worry about translation. You don't have to worry about speed because it's already been localized for North America. You don't have to worry about the ROM. You just stick it and go. So there definitely is a market for this. I definitely can see the appeal. Obviously, because somebody's doing the work on this, the repos do tend to be more expensive. So the average cost of repro copy of this game runs you about $45.
For a repro, that's not actually that expensive, because I know that some of the repros, especially when Star Fox 2 before it's officially released, they could run like 60 to 70. But then obviously that had the FX2 chip in there, so...
Right, yeah. So, but, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, as far as the repro copy of this game goes, it's not that much. I forget to look how much this game was selling for on Switch Store. Liam, do you remember how much you paid for it?
On the Switch Store, it's the way that it's integrated is if you have an online Switch subscription.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forget about that. Yep, yeah. Nintendo does that strange thing with their catalog. So.
I mean, it's not. I mean, the Switch Online subscription isn't really too expensive. I think here it's £17.99, which is around about 22, 23. So that'd be kind of about the same price as getting a copy shipped from Japan. So
yeah, it's $20 here in the U.S.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, right?
And that's for an entire year. So I mean, based on the other Super Nintendo games alone that you get, I think it's worth.
Yeah.
I'm paid 3 years in advance, so. I mean, I was like, I spend God knows how much money on Xbox, the Game Pass and whatever else with Xbox Live. I pay that every month, you know what I mean? So I was like, geez, if I can just spend $20 and get it for a year, I'm just going to spend $60, which is what I would do with the Xbox for an entire year and just get it for free. So I don't have to worry about it.
True. Yep. I do wish they allowed you to actually keep the game, but... I agree with you that as far as the price goes like prescription model, that's not a bad price.
I mean, it's also the fact that it's got some Japanese exclusives on there. Like Mario's Picross is on there.
Yep.
Psycho Dreams fully translated on there now. And they keep updating it every 2 to 3 months and adding a couple of new titles here and there. I kind of wish they added more, but it's wishful thinking sometimes.
Yeah, the catalog as big as it is, the dripping and drabbing of the stuff's kind of annoying. I do hear that. So
yeah, at this point, it's like, look, I know that it's only $20 that we're paying, but either drop some titles every month, even if it's just one, drop every month, or start adding other systems. So this way, there's at least some interest. Because I mean, for the most part, a lot of people are like kind of asking, why am I even paying for this? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
which I understand. I completely get it. You know, and it's like playing online on the Switch is kind of a pain in the butt. But you know, we finally got Bluetooth accessibility for our headset, so there's that.
Yeah, finally, like years later. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of... Sorry, go ahead.
No, nope, sorry. Wasn't important. Like, you go ahead.
I was also going to say, I mean, some of the games that have imported to the to the Switch in terms of the Super Nintendo, some of them are just beyond bizarre. Like, I think Fireman 5000's on there, which is never heard of it. Which I think that game you're basically just being a firefighter in like a top-down perspective, and kind of makes me think, why port that? At that point, you might as well have just ported Balls 3D at that point.
Don't give many ideas.
Oh goodness no! If you're listening, Nintendo, please don't do that.
But yeah, Nintendo. Yeah, what I'm gonna say is like Nintendo always does like very weird choices, like their choices, like game philosophy and design and whatnot. But that's why people love them, because they're because like Nintendo's Nintendo. So, but I'm not gonna get into that argument like right now. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up the game talk. So, Liam, it's been great having you on the podcast. It's like awesome having you on here finally. So thank you very much for joining us.
You.
We very much appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure being on here today. Actually, I didn't have anything planned today, so I'm kind of glad you asked me to come on the podcast, because it's been a huge bundle of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Glad to hear it. So you mentioned before that you used to Twitch stream, but you don't do that anymore. Do you have any current projects you're working on? Like, podcast, articles, or besides that kind of stuff that you want to plug?
Well, I am a writer. I've written about my life every day for, as of recording this episode, 1,925 days without missing one. Because I suffer from ADHD, OCD, Asperger's, Tourette's, and anxiety, I kind of write my daily life through my eyes to kind of get... It's kind of like an awareness thing, so people can see how I perceive things. On that website as well, I do video game reviews, film reviews, music reviews. I write short stories occasionally. Pretty much most types of media I've got covered on there. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay, and do you have the URL handy?
Yep, it is at liampiperblog.wordpress.com.
Okay. We will try to remember to drop that also in the show notes so people can check that out. So, appreciate it. So, all right. Awesome. Well, once again, Liam, appreciate you having you on the podcast. I'm sure you have other games that you'll have to talk about, so we'll probably be back in the future at some point. So
I definitely have quite a few, trust me.
But yeah, so thank you for thank you for joining us as always. It was a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure as well.
So, if you want to give any feedback, questions, suggestions, etc., you can find us on our Facebook page, or you also can send me an email directly at the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. Feel free also to shoot over your thoughts upon past games or current games or whatnot as far as Super NES. Feedback and thoughts about games is always appreciated. So, Joe, how can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at JoeSux30, and I have a very public Facebook. You can find me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again to both of you guys for joining me here as always. And stay safe, everybody out there. Take care, and we'll catch you again next time. Oh, next episode. That'll help. Another guest host episode coming up. We're going to be joined by Ray, who hasn't podcasted before in the past. I know that for a fact. So, Ray is bringing a game I've never played before. I know very little very little about the table to talk about. Bob, also called B.O.B. So, looks like a very quirky, unique game. Where it's going to be interesting to get into that.
Be interesting.
So, yes, that'll be the next episode. So stay tuned for that, folks. So, thank you again for always listening to the podcast. Podcast as always, we very much appreciate it. Be well, everybody. Stay safe. Catch you again next time. Later, all.
Bye bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.